Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to the Hindu newspaper analysis for today. Before we begin, reminding you once again, 6th of November marks the beginning of the Byjus Exam Prep IAS All India Prelims Test Series for IAS 2023. This is a test series from where thousands of students have successfully prepared and secured great ranks in the UPSC examination the past few years. This is now your opportunity to take part in this test series starting from the 6th of November and get an all India rank along with detailed mark sheet with your strengths and weaknesses for each and every test. This test series will be both online and offline and available in both Hindi and in English medium. The link to register is given in the description of the video. The first two tests, that is on the 6th of November and on the 13th of November, would be free of cost. If you are in Delhi, I would recommend you to attend the first test in Delhi because all our teachers will be there offline to give a live explanation of all the questions and also take the doubts of the students. Now let's begin with the very first article that we have written by Mr. Kaushik Basu, a well-known economist who has held multiple positions with the government of India. He says here that if you look at the Indian economy, the problem of Indian economy, that is very high unemployment rate and not a very good growth rate, is not something that can be traced back to COVID. The reality is, even if you look at the growth numbers of Indian economy prior to COVID, the story was not that great. If you look at how the Indian economy is facing multiple problems right now, the first big problem is the Indian national rupee has been depreciating and inflation is very high. Now, with these two factors, you can actually excuse the government. Because the fact is that these two factors are global factors. Look at major currencies around the world. Look at euro, look at pound. All these are losing value against the dollar. Also, inflation has become a global concept ever since the pandemic had started. Because in the pandemic, most of the nations gave free of cost money to their citizens, leading to the rise in inflation. So for these two factors, let's excuse the government for a bit as per the author. However, the one other factor where the government of India cannot make any excuses is the very high unemployment rate. India is doing very poorly when it comes to employment generation. In the month of October, the unemployment rate in India was 7.8%. As per a report of ILO, that is International Labour Organization, which was presented by the World Bank, the report said that amongst the youth in India, that is people of India between 15 and 24 years of age who are looking for work, about 28.3% cannot find work. That is more than 1 in 4, which is a huge number and also gives a warning signal. Because if you look at other nations and compare this number with them, for Iran the number is 27.2, Egypt 24.2, even for Syria it is just 26.2, that is lesser than India. And then look at our neighbors. Look at Bangladesh, 14.7, Indonesia, 14. This all shows the fact that in India, the employment generation has not been great. If you look at the graph of India's growth story, it is very mixed. In 2021-22, we were all appreciating that India became one of the fastest growing economies in the world with a growth rate of 8.7%. But the intelligent people knew that this was because our base was very low. Because during the pandemic in 2020, India actually had a minus 6.6% growth. So after that, even if you consider 8.7% growth, and if you actually take these 2 years together, you would see that the real growth in 2 years was just 2%. So this was actually because of the very low base created because of India's decline in the GDP. Not just this, if you look at this financial year also, as you would have seen, IMF has cut down India's growth forecast to 6.1%, again a very negative sign. The problem here is even this much growth, 6%, 6.1%, is because there are a few companies, only few rich people in India that are actually growing. So the growth is not evenly distributed. Most of the middle class, lower middle class people still are not seeing any growth. This growth is loop-sided and only a few corporations are making profit, while the common man is still not being able to find enough jobs. If you go back and look at India's growth story since independence, you would see till the beginning of 1990s, India had a very slow growth rate, often called the Hindu rate of growth, that is close to 3%. Then 1991 came, that was an era of reforms. From 2003, India actually took a huge jump and became one of the fastest growing economies in the entire world. In fact, from 2005 to 2008, India's growth rate was very high, 9.3%, 9.2%, and then it even touched the 10% mark. In fact, from 2003 to 2011, although the entire world was actually going through the Great Recession, India was one of the few global countries that were doing very, very well. India, in fact, was the best performing country in terms of economic growth in that era. Now, why is it that we have not been able to match the growth of that era? The author says that COVID should not be given the blame for that because the slowdown started before that. Now, the reason he says that the country's growth is very slow is because of lack of investment. The author says that there are some good steps taken by the government, like the new insolvency and bankruptcy code, but the reality is that steps such as demonetization have not been great for the economy. But the biggest negative for the Indian economy right now is the lack of investment. Lack of investment means lack of spending on roads, bridges, factories, human capital, skill development, etc. If you look at India's growth, you would see those years where India has grown very, very well are the years where India also invested heavily in all these things. For example, in 2007-8, India's investment had actually reached over 39%. And now in 2019, it has fallen down to 32.2%. Now, the reason why this investment has come down are various. For example, government itself has not been able to spend a lot of money on capital expenditure. Also, from the private sector itself, you don't see a lot of investment because they don't really trust the economy as such right now. That is why, as per the author, there needs to be a proper shift in the policy. Rather than focusing on making few corporations, few businesses rich, the government policies should focus on having a larger number of people in India who are much more prosperous and have good jobs. Here, I am showing you a graph that actually tells you the level of investment done by the government of India. This graph shows that it was in 2009 that the investment as a percentage of our GDP reached the highest level above 40%. Since then, it has been on a downward trend. India's investment, as you can see from this heading as well, has declined to 31% of its GDP from its peak of 39%. The lesser the investment, lesser would be the job creation, lesser the investment, lesser would be the growth in manufacturing as well. Now, there are multiple articles written about the same topic in the newspaper every single month. Let me give you some more inputs about that. Nations around the world have actually focused on public investment-led GDP growth. Investment-led GDP growth means government spending more money on infrastructure building, on skill development, etc. In fact, if you look at the South Asian economies, how they revived after their financial crisis of 1997 was because of government's public road building projects where the government in those nations spent a lot of money. Indian government in the first decade of the 21st century did spend money on projects such as the Golden Quadrilateral, Pradhan Mantri Sadak Yojana, etc., which led to high growth that we saw in 2003 to 2011 era. Since then, the investment has declined and it has come down considerably. In fact, it reached the lowest point in 2015 when investment was only 30.7%. This is something that needs to change as per the author. The next article that we have here is about the problematic situation which now is being seen in the state pollution control boards. The authors here belong to the Center for Policy Research. It is a think tank that prepares a lot of reports mainly about environmental pollution in India. The authors here say that the major responsibility of fighting pollution in the Indian cities is with the pollution boards in the country. Now, as you know, there is a Center Pollution Control Board called the CPCB, which works at the central government level. Similarly, at the state level, we have the State Pollution Control Boards. And for union territories, we have the Pollution Control Committees. The problem here is while these committees have been given a lot of responsibility, such as suggesting to the cities how to reduce their pollution, suggesting to the cities how to spend the money given to them by the Finance Commission recommendations, etc. But the reality is that these boards have a lot of problem in them. And these authors have given three major problems in the boards. The first major problem, if you look at how these boards actually are formed, over half of the members in the boards actually belong to the industries and public sector corporations. Means those places which are responsible for pollution, they are the ones who control over half of these boards. So how can you expect these boards to actually take such strong decisions? Those organizations actually pollute the environment. Their representatives actually form the majority of the board, which is obviously a big conflict of interest. On the other hand, people such as scientists, academicians, medical practitioners, they only make up 7% of the board members, which is a very bad situation. Second problem, if you look at the leadership of these state pollution control boards, there is a very dismal situation present there. For example, Chhattisgarh State Pollution Control Board removed its chairman after only 18 days. In 15 days, members were removed in Haryana and UP. There are many other states where there are many vacancies for many months in these state pollution control boards, and the government has not paid attention. 40% of the posts still remain vacant across 9 cities. There are vacancies, especially at the technical positions, because of which even the engineers and the experts that are a part of the board, they don't even get much time and much resources to undertake study of how pollution can be reduced. All in all, these pollution boards are just on paper. When it comes to actually fighting against pollution on ground, they have not been given any resources as such. These are the kind of articles that you see around the media. That is, state bodies are ill equipped to handle air pollution. Now, you might question yourself, why is it that these kind of issues have still not been resolved? The fact remains that these kind of issues are just not a part of our mainstream media. You will hardly ever see the mainstream media actually discussing these kind of issues. Our TV debates, our debates in the political spectrum are based on something entirely different and not on issues such as the air pollution. That is why this has never been a top priority for the government as well. Also reminding you, what are different types of pollution control boards that we have? At the central government level, we have the Central Pollution Control Board, CPCB. It's a statutory body formed in 1974 under the Water Act. This also has been given the power under the Air Act of 1981. This is the body that gives technical services to the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change with respect to pollution control. Then the CPCB has also been given the power to undertake study of cleanliness of water bodies across the country and suggest to the government how to control water pollution. At the state levels, we have the state pollution control boards, and at the union territory level, we have the pollution control committees. The next article that we have here is about the government making a statement in the Supreme Court. There is an ongoing petition in the Supreme Court where the question is being asked about what exactly is the government doing to give voting rights to the NRIs in India. So the people who are actually Indian citizens but living abroad, what is it that the government is doing to give them voting rights? Now, as you know, right now the provision is that the NRIs still have the right to vote, but they have to come back to India, go to the voting booth to actually vote. They can't vote online, they can't have a proxy, meaning that no one else can vote on their behalf, they can't vote anywhere else, they have to come back. Now, the PIL is that the government of India should actually give right to those who are Indians but living abroad to vote in some other manner. That can be online voting or that can be proxy voting, etc. The fact is there are lakhs and lakhs of Indian citizens who are living abroad who are NRIs, but obviously they can't really afford to come back to India just to vote. And that is why we have to find a way out for them. This is because a petition has been filed by a UAE based doctor who has said that NRIs should be allowed to vote through postal ballot. Similar kind of a provision which is given to the armed forces personnel in India. The important point to note here is government earlier did try to introduce a bill to allow overseas Indians to vote by proxy. Proxy means you nominate someone else on your behalf. That is, my friend, my family member, he or she will go and vote on my behalf. That will be called a proxy. But that bill got lapsed because of the dissolution of the 16th Lok Sabha, and it was never introduced again in the 17th Lok Sabha that we have. So that question is still unresolved. Now, just to remind you, what is the current law in India? Till 2010, NRIs were not even eligible to vote. Now, what is an NRI? See, the official definition of NRI is that in a year there are 365 days. So, over half days, that is, if anyone resides outside India for 183 days or more, officially that person is called an NRI. So if you live outside India for 6 months or more, your name automatically used to be taken off the voter list till 2010. So till 2010, NRIs were not allowed to vote even if they came back because their name was removed from the voter list. But at least in 2010, the law was changed. NRIs were still allowed to vote, but they had to come back in person to vote. They had to go to the voting booth, they had to take their passport, etc. But they were allowed to vote if they could come back after 2010. Before 2010, they were not allowed to vote. Now, the government of India has been taking multiple steps to ensure that voting becomes easier for the overseas voters in India. As we discussed in 2017, the government of India did try to bring in a law to allow them to vote through proxy, but again, the bill got lapsed because of the dissolution of the 16th Lok Sabha. It was never introduced again. The Election Commission of India also has been in favor of allowing the NRIs to vote via postal ballot. Postal ballot is a system that is used by the people working in the armed forces because most probably they are not at their place of voter ID. They are allowed to vote via postal ballot. So they post their vote. Those are the ones that are counted first at the time of counting. So Election Commission of India is in favor of giving this facility to the NRIs as well. But so far the government has not taken a call about that as well. The next article that we have here is from Kashmir, where the families are celebrating the harvest of saffron in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, or rather in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, this article per se does not give a lot of important information worthy of the examination, but the topic of the article, that is saffron and saffron cultivation, gives us a good point to actually learn about saffron. Now, as you know, saffron is a plant whose dried stigmas, which are thread-like parts, you would have seen saffron as well, they are used to make the saffron spice. It's one of the most expensive spices in the entire world. It is believed that it was first introduced in Kashmir by Central Asian immigrants around 1st century BCE. It is very, very costly and it is referred to as bahukam in ancient Sanskrit literature. It is mainly harvested in Karewa. Karewa are the highlands or elevated tablelands in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, in order to give a push to saffron cultivation in India, the government of India has actually taken multiple efforts. First, the government of India launched the National Saffron Mission in 2010 to ensure that cultivation of saffron actually spreads across Jammu and Kashmir, and if possible, the cultivation of saffron should even go to northeast part of the country because the climatic conditions were similar and it was possible to grow saffron there as well. This project comes under Ministry of Science and Technology. However, in 2014, the government realized that we are not able to actually expand the production as much as we had wanted. In 2020, the government of India revised the mission to give a push to cultivation of saffron in northeast part of the country. The responsibility was given to Northeast Center for Technological Applications and Reach called NECTA. This mission of taking saffron to northeast part of India was called the Saffron Bowl Mission. Do remember that? Under this, few locations have been identified in Arunachal Pradesh and in Meghalaya, especially for saffron cultivation under Department of Science and Technology. It would be seen in the coming days whether or not it becomes successful or not. These were the important articles we want to discuss on the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one. In order to truly live up to our democratic values, India must give remote voting facilities to migrants as well. Critically analyze. Second, discuss the initiatives taken by the government of India to boost saffron production in the country. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video. Also, it's Wednesday today, so don't forget to join us at 8 p.m. on our YouTube channel for the International Relations This Week episode at 8 p.m. Thank you so much.